All right, joining us now, one of the key players in the whole White House discussion on tariffs and, of course, the economy is the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Mr. Steve Myron. Steve, thanks for coming on. Appreciate your staying up late tonight. It's not so late, really. So just clear this up for me. I'm getting conflicting advice. With respect to the 10% baseline tariff and with respect to the so-called reciprocal tariff charges, is it both or is it one or the other?
Thanks for having me, Larry. It's great to see you again. Look, you know, the 10% is sort of a floor. So what the president has done has decided that other countries are going to pay a tariff similar to the totality of trade effects they impose upon our exports. And there's a 10% floor on that. And so it could be 10% or it could be higher. But the president campaigned on, the president promised to make trade fairer for Americans. He promised to make American workers on fairer ground vis-a-vis the rest of the world. And he's doing that.
So I was going to ask you, China at the top of the list. I've got the color chart, and I appreciated the president putting that chart up in the Rose Garden. So USA discounted reciprocal tariff on China's 34%. China charges to the U.S., which is tariff and non-tariff barriers, is 67%. This thing is 34. Now, when I look at the 34% that we're going to charge them, this is a kinder and gentler President Trump. Do I add the 10% baseline tax or not?
No, you don't add the 10% baseline tax. The 10% baseline tax is for companies. Is for countries that would have is a minimum that countries would pay to avoid transshipment problems, to place a minimum, to put American workers on fair ground.
All right, I get it. No, I just wanted to clarify it, and we appreciate it very much. I figured you're the smartest guy in the building, so certainly you will know about this. Talk to me for 1 second about transshipping. You know, we had former Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross on the show Monday evening, and there's a lot of cheating that goes on. And specifically, you know, China okay, so we may tariff China, and China may not be able to sell, but they will sell to Mexico, and then they'll sneak their stuff in underneath the domestic content rules of USMCA. How do you stop that, Steve Myron?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic point, and it remains a significant problem. You know, China not only failed to live up to its Phase 1 agreements when it made a trade deal with the president the first time, and continues to cheat, lie, and steal from America, but they go out of their way to avoid the tariffs via the transshipment that you're describing. So it's of critical importance not only to crack down on transshipment, but to take a worldwide approach to tariffs, as the president has begun to do with the reciprocal tariff program, which by looking at trade balances with individual countries, the president is addressing transshipment in that manner.
Talk to me about Mexico and Canada. Now, the 25% tariff, but if it's USMCA, okay, then there is no tariff. They would have a 10% baseline in lieu of that, or how's this going to work on our neighbors?
Yeah, so I believe what's happening is that Mexico and Canada are not part of this program. I believe that they are part of the other USMCA specific programs, including the Canada and Mexico fentanyl tariffs, as well as the auto tariffs, which will affect them as well. So
if they are compliant with USMCA, they're okay, they're clean, no tariff.
I'm not an expert on the trade law and the trade implementation, but I believe that's the case.
Yeah, I think
we can follow up with USTR. Yeah,
I think yes, we can either do that or call Bob Lighthizer, or somebody's going to know about this. I get it. How about the estimates of potential tariff-related revenues? I've seen, you know, 600 billion, 700 billion. There's a lot of money there. Have you done any calculations, you and your colleagues at the CEA?
Yeah, so we have looked at it. I don't have a precise number for you right now, but what I will say is that it's maybe in the area that you were discussing there, maybe closer to 500. We'll have a precise number in coming days. But what's really important is what you do with that revenue.
Yes.
And that's a really nice side effect of tariffs. Look, the tariffs are aimed at the national emergency, but the revenue is a really nice side effect, and you can use that revenue to help pay for tax cuts, to pay for the extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and there's even enough to pay for the further tax relief that the president has promised, and potentially more.
Steve, this is the most wonderful thing. This is music to my ears. I can't believe how beautiful you are saying this. I raised it with Speaker Johnson, who is a supply-sider, and he said he'd think about it.
Yeah.
I don't see what now I know this stuff's not going to happen overnight. I get that, but if you're making estimates of revenues from various sources, right? These 10-year estimates. Maybe they're not worth the paper they're printed on, but everybody in Washington uses them. If you're going to, plug in $500–600 billion a year, to me, that's new tax cuts. Heck, I'd lower the personal income tax. I'd lower the corporate tax. I'd lower the payroll tax, that kind of thing. Is there a discussion about that, Steve Myron?
No, look, I mean, I absolutely agree with you. I think that those are fabulous ideas. And I mean, what could be better than tariff revenue paid for by foreigners that's used to cut taxes on American families and American companies and American firms, right? What could possibly be a better combination than that? That to me is an idea that can help usher in the golden age. And I think that there is a conversation around further tax relief that the president has promised, that the president has emphasized: no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. And given the scope of these tariffs, there ought to be some additional revenue left over. What we do with that revenue, well, that's between Congress and the president.
Yeah, music to my ears. Steve, let me ask another question. You've written about this down through the years, the fate of the dollar exchange rate. Yep. Now, I'm going to put gold aside for a minute. The dollar is very weak. All currencies are very weak against gold, but I'm going to put that aside. I believe you have written, and so some others, when these tariffs are applied, dollars become a little more scarce, and not as many. The trade deficits are lower, dollars are more scarce, and the value, the exchange rate of the dollar goes up. Now, you can tell me if you still agree with that. And then, to me, if that is true, if the dollar is going to go up against these other currencies, then that would help to subdue any inflation or price pressures, would it not?
Yes, so there's a lot to unpack here, and both in theory and the history of empirical evidence in the economic literature is that the dollar should move in response to the tariffs. Now, that's the one issue is that's an all else equal statement, and there are a lot of moving cross currents that are occurring now that weren't the case in 2018, 2019. In paramount among those is our attempts to reorient the economy from the Biden administration government-fueled economic growth to more sustainable, durable economic growth driven by the private sector, right? And that has had consequences in the economic growth data and will continue to have consequences in the economic growth data, which are causing cross currents and also affecting the dollar and getting a little bit in the way of that at the moment. Now, when it comes to who pays for the tariffs, at the end of the day, the person who pays for an economic policy is what economists would call the more inflexible person. And the example that I like to give is if you're buying a house. So you're looking at a town to buy a house, and then the town raises the property tax rate. You can just decide to move to look at the next town over. But the person selling the house can't pick up the house and move it. You're flexible. The seller is inflexible. The seller has to lower their selling price to eat the property tax.
Well, that's
and the same thing.
I love that. Look, Kevin Hassett and I have talked about this for years. I mean, I think I like to use China as the exporting nation, but the exporters who are hit by that, they're going to have to eat half of it. They're going to eat half of it. I think that's what the evidence shows.
They'll eat much more than half because they're inflexible and we're flexible because we can substitute to home production. We can substitute to different countries to import from. The countries that have built their entire economies around exporting to the American consumer have no substitute. They are inflexible. They will eat the burden of the tax in the long run. And what that means is that they ultimately pay for the burden of the tariff. Now, there's a couple ways that can happen. It can happen through the exchange rate. And part of that played out in 2018, 2019, or they can just lower their selling prices.
All right, last one.
But one way or another, they'll pay, yeah.
Last one. It's a good answer. Last one, real quick. How concerned are you about short-term cost increases, short-term price increases?
Look, at the end of the day, this is a historic change in tariff rates and a historic change in policy that is standing up for American workers, standing up for American companies, and putting America first and on fair ground against the rest of the world for the first time in decades.
Now we see the Dow off maybe 1,300 points right before the opening bell. You're down 200 on the S&P. That's still 3.7%, on the NASDAQ holding on to a 4.5% decline. Adam Johnson with me to take out the market for this hour. My fear, I got to say, fear is that stocks are down and they stay down for a protracted period of time. Is that likely?
That's an understandable fear. I don't think that's actually how it's going to play out. And I'll tell you why, Stuart. Everyone is running the numbers right now, trying to figure out what this actually means. I've read several reports that estimate the impact of tariffs on inflation is only 0.2%, right? So it's not as though this suddenly creates another inflation runaway scenario. Not at all. I think the more apropos question that we all as money managers need to figure out is what's the impact to earnings? And intuitively, Stuart, I think it's somewhere between 2, 3, maybe 4%.
Down.
Yes.
Less than we expected.
Yeah. And I'll tell you why. As ugly as these tariffs sound superficially, they're going to get spread around. In other words, U.S. companies that rely on imports will squeeze the overseas suppliers. You got to help me out on price. They're going to say, how much can we pass along to our clients? Hey, what can we do in our business to lower our costs, to offset? So CFOs right now are getting very creative. They're sharpening their pencils, and they're trying to figure out how to bear the brunt of this. And I think that's ultimately why it's only a single-digit impact to earnings, and we will be able to get through that. The immediate reaction right now is emotional. Sell everything.
But if you've got any impact on profits, and profits are the bottom line for stock prices, if you have any impact down 3 or 4% from what was expected, stock valuations will come down by that amount. So you're not going to go straight back up to new highs. That's not going to happen.
But guess what? We were already on the NASDAQ. I tend to look at the NASDAQ because I'm a growth investor. The NASDAQ was already down 16% yesterday. Given what we're showing people on the screen for futures, it's down another 4, maybe 5%. So the NASDAQ has corrected 20%, which tells me that we've already more than discounted what we need to, given what's happening. Stocks are already down 20%. They're not going to fall another 20%. Are we going to fall 40% because of this? No, we're not.
Okay.
So people are going to run the numbers and figure out what the real impact is.
Right from the top, we've got the initial read. The Dow is down 950 points. That is 2.3%. That's in the first few seconds of business. At the Dow 30, I see 2 winners, 1 unchanged, although maybe it's not open yet. The rest are down. They're losers. The S&P 500 down 2.4%, a similar loss to the Dow. And the Nasdaq, though, again, a bigger loss than the other indicators. You're down 3% there, 500 points. Big tech down across the board. Google's down 1.4%. Microsoft down almost 2%. Apple, look at that, back to 195. Meta is down 5%, and Amazon is down 6.3%. The chip makers, I believe that, they're way down this morning. Yes, they are. But Taylor, I thought semiconductors were excluded from tariffs.
They are. So that's why you had a lot of people yesterday saying, this is great. I can buy NVIDIA and TSMC. I think the problem or some of the worries this morning was the retaliation from China with a 34% tariff. How much companies like Micron, Qualcomm, Broadcom, even SMCI have exposure to revenue from China? How does that start to impact their business? That's, I think, where some of this uncertainty comes in.
We were talking with Mark Mahaney a moment ago about the $1 trillion that the Mag 7 stocks lost just yesterday alone in market value. Let's have a look at it again now. Yeah, down again. I don't know how much that wipes out, but it's not $1 trillion, not quite.
No, but maybe another negative day. And I think Mark was spot on. Everything I'm reading this morning is the impact of now the shift to the de minimis rule, particularly with Amazon, where now tariffs are included on goods under $800, and typically we had not seen that. And so, again, this is this new Trump administration that is saying we are not allowing loopholes at this moment. And so Amazon certainly down 5.5% this morning on more of that news.
The Dow is now down 10% from its high of December the 4th. That means it's in correction territory. The NASDAQ is actually in bear market territory. That's how far down we've gone. Show me Apple, please. They had their worst day in over 5 years yesterday. They're down another 3.5% today. Ouch.
Yeah, so Apple is an interesting story. Yesterday, at one point, on a percentage basis, the worst day since March of 2020 in the depths of COVID and wiping out $300 billion in market cap, which at one point was the worst ever that they've seen in terms of a wipeout. This also is a fundamental story. If you think about 90% or more of the phones are made in China, 50% iMacs, 75 to 80% iPads. So again, this is a company that is so embedded there. To their credit, they had tried to move some of their supply chains to Vietnam and Thailand, but now those countries are no longer exempt.
Yeah, that's right. Chinese companies, I presume they are down today. Yes, they are across the board.
Who needs who more, Stu? Who's going to blink, right? So that's the question is, China and the U.S., given that we are the world's consumer, we import and consume $20 trillion of goods per year, a lot of that from China, and buying the crap or the good stuff maybe that these people sell. So again, who needs who more? If you have these big companies that are exporting to us, if their costs are going up, if we're not going to eat the tax, again, how does all of this play out? I will say Trump just responding and saying China is playing it wrong. They've panicked. They're doing the one thing they can't afford to do. So we'll have to see how this
That's from Trump, just said that. Okay.
On Truth Social.
We're having the same conversation that we had at this time yesterday.
We are.
All these sectors, they're all down. Okay, go through the big banks. They're down again as well.
Yeah, and this is a very broad-based story. We talked yesterday, the markets shoot first, ask questions later. But when you have more and more people like Goldman Sachs and now JP Morgan coming out and saying that the odds of a recession are a lot higher today than they were yesterday, how does that impact the big banks that lend to consumers, that do those auto loans, that do those mortgage loans? Are we starting to will we see a rise in delinquency rates on credit cards? Again, I am speculating way out into the future, but that's sort of the question the markets are pondering today. How does the recession impact the banks, a la the consumer?
Well, okay, those are the big name banks. Now show me the regionals.
Similar
they're all down again.
Story. And from the regional banking crisis blow up that we had a few years ago, regional banks are so exposed in many parts to the mortgage market. So again, shooting first, asking questions later. How are we thinking about exposure to a consumer who now might be even stretched even more?
I got another sector which is down just like yesterday.
Is it?
Credit cards.
Yeah.
What do we got?
I wish I had more news for you. This is the same story. Are you still spending? Are you on the Visa? Are you swiping that MasterCard? Are you spending on that Amex?
Wealthy
are you canceling
people.
trips?
You got to look at wealthy people.
They are. Now, there was that Wall Street Journal
spend.
report where the top 10% of wealthy people are making up 50% of spending.
Right.
What if that top 10% starts to pull back? Again, I'm speculating.
Well, with the
no
market
data
down
to
so
say
much,
so.
I mean, that's the wealth effect. They can't fall
is.
back on a couple of $1 million worth of stocks.
Right. Well, and if I have all that money in the market to pay for my down payment on that new home, and now that money's gone, how does that sort of impact the economy?
Yeah, how does that affect it? One more time, show me the retailers, please. Really taking it on the chin
Another
again.
day, yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah, and these are the big companies we've talked about with big exposure to China. Nike, one of those. Crocs, one of those. Foot Locker, one of those. Now, what's interesting is Nike and Foot Locker also have some big fundamental stories. These are companies in the midst of big turnarounds. We've heard from Nike, where's the new fun product? We haven't seen it. And then this on top of that, right? And so there's the fundamental stories of some of these companies, and then there's that broader, oh my gosh, you have exposure to Asia, supply chain, sell now.
I mean, it's not panic here, is it?
It's not. I mean, I want to play REM. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine because this is 2 days. We're talking about 2 days of sell-off, not erasing 2 years of gains. I think we need to worry about if we're sitting here next Friday and we're seeing the same red ink. But the thing is, you bring up even Apple, worst day almost on record. And I love Apple. I've been in Apple since a price adjusted by like $41 a share. I'm not jumping in to buy here. I don't think it's compelling enough because of the valuations. They got stretched. We're having a reset now. I mean, Mark said it best. When you can buy quality names at about 12 to 15 times earnings, that's when you back up the truck. We're not there yet. We're getting close, but we're not there yet.
One last group, the automakers. I presume they're down again?
Yeah, maybe a little bit less so than yesterday. Ford, okay, we're only down 3%. GM, Stellantis. And this is interesting because we heard from GM yesterday that they were increasing truck production in the U.S. I think it was the Indiana plant. Stellantis, I think it was the one, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, had said that we're working on idling some of the plants in Mexico and Canada as we try to reorient and figure out. So again, I think these are companies that we're hearing from that are trying to navigate through this period of uncertainty. Investors are trying to figure out, again, do they wake up and is there a 10 to 15% earnings cut wipeout this year? Is there not? What are the new valuations of these companies worth if there is a bigger hit to earnings than we thought 2 days ago?
Tesla down 5%. Look at that. One last one. GE Healthcare. GE Healthcare. Is that a special situation?
It is. So this is very interesting. So Beijing had also announced that they were doing some export controls on medium and heavy rare earth minerals, namely gadolinium. Gadolinium is used as the contrast agent that helps improve the clarity of MRI scans. GE Healthcare makes MRI scans. Within their imaging segment, that's 46% of their revenue last year through MRIs. So this is actually a very idiosyncratic story about how then can you still go forward and for how long with MRIs.
But it's dramatic nonetheless. And that's a tariff result right there. I want to repeat the India news. India is reportedly considering a tariff cut on $23 billion worth of imports coming in from America. Congressman Aaron Bean, Republican from Florida, joins me now. Congressman, trade negotiations are unfolding on a daily basis. It's really the art of the deal we're looking at here, isn't it?
100%, Stuart Varney. By the way, it's great to be with you. Good morning from your nation's capital. It is the art of the deal. Anybody that's read that, I guess you could do a new chapter called America First in the art of the deal, and you see the effects immediately. India now has come to the table to say, wait, we can do better. We want a trade deal. They've already dropped tariffs on liquor and motorcycles, but they can do more. They will do more because they want American buyers for their goods. So Trump is doing it, and it's fun to see it in real time.
Next one, Congressman. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that the Department of Justice will prosecute the fraud uncovered by Elon Musk's DOGE. Watch this.
We are hearing a lot about fraud, waste, and abuse. A lot of waste and abuse, but there is a tremendous amount of fraud. And Elon, thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your team. You have uncovered so much fraud in our government, and we will prosecute you. We have an internal task force now working with every agency sitting here at this table. And if you've committed fraud, we're coming after you.
Congressman, how do you prosecute government fraud?
Well, first of all, let me speak on behalf of American taxpayers across the nation when they see that clip of Attorney General Bondi saying we're going to prosecute fraudsters. The word is finally. Finally, accountability is coming to Washington, D.C. We've never seen it before. We've never seen accountability. So I was on the Small Business Administration. We watched millions of dollars walk out the door in fraud on purpose during COVID. And so finally, we're going to get some accountability. So the American taxpayer is dancing in the street and is saying, go get them, Pam Bondi. Let's go get them.
But quickly,
sure.
Can we get the money back? Can we get the money back?
Yeah, you know, Roger Williams is the chair of the Small Business Administration. We fought the Biden Small Business Administrator, who at one time was going to say, let's just forgive all of these fraudsters. Let's not go after them. And we said, heck no. You know, the worst thing we could do is just sell this debt to debt collectors, but we're coming after them. And I think we have the technology. DOGE has proven it. We have the technology. We have the receipts of they've taken this money. So all we need is a little task force to go after these fraudsters. They've never had to worry about it. They never thought anybody was coming, but they didn't anticipate Pam Bondi coming to get them.
All right, Congressman Aaron Bean, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Hope to see you again soon.
Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I want to bring in Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson. Congressman, it's always great to talk with you. And I want to get your reaction to DOGE digging in further to these agencies. To be clear, you know, Ratcliffe actually invited the DOGE team. I mean, they're asking for them to come in and look at what I just mentioned, which is inefficiency, in particular, the technology inefficiencies that they've been finding so far.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. It's always an honor to join you. And look, the great news is the Director Ratcliffe at the CIA is inviting DOGE in. And this is a little bit like if you were at a company and you've got a new CFO, Chief Financial Officer, a new CTO or Chief Information Officer, and then saying, well, they can't have access to all the system. Like, are you kidding me? No, we brought the team in. We have a new leadership team, new CEO, President Trump. He's bringing his team in, and he wants to look at the full system. And the system is rigged. You see how it's rigged against the American people over and over again. And when I'm back home talking to my constituents, they're way more upset about what's been happening with their money than the idea that Elon Musk and his team are the ones accessing it. I thought Brett Baer did a phenomenal job highlighting these aren't like, you know, high school kids that are at some hackathon. These are really successful people who are using their talent really to serve our country.
Well, I want to ask you about the messaging when it comes to DOGE, because you said something really important just now. You said that when you go back home and you talk to your constituents, they support DOGE. And we're seeing that in the polling that they support DOGE. It seems to be how DOGE is going about the work. But when they were on with Brett Baer last week, Musk said, this is direct quote, "I do agree that we actually want to be careful in the cuts. We want to measure twice, if not thrice, and to cut once." Why is that message not getting out to the American people that they are being very careful in how they carry out these cuts to funding and programs?
Well, there were some awkward first starts where, things were frozen, and these are things that we needed. Like in Ohio, we were in the middle of a bird flu epidemic, and some of the ag inspectors were held up because they were sort of temporarily approved. They were sort of like temps. They weren't hired full time. And there were little awkward missteps there. But I think go back a few Fridays ago, maybe a little over a month ago now, Susie Wiles brought the whole cabinet in and talked to the president, said, hey, we want you to work with DOGE, invite them in, but either way, find ways to save the American taxpayers money and deliver on the promises I made in my campaign. And I'll be following up with Elon Musk to make sure that you guys are doing that. And here you see, secretary after secretary, and now the director of the CIA saying, please come on in and let's have a look. I think a lot of my folks in the financial services space excited about the Securities and Exchange Commission. They've been doing things like sue and settle and redistributing the money to causes that are really at odds with the direction of a strong economy. They're undermining capital formation in America instead of helping facilitate it. So you see things like that they're getting after.
And I'm sure that the critics are going to come out and start screaming with the connection between Elon Musk and the SEC because he runs publicly traded companies. But let's talk about this. So DOGE has got new legal problems. You just had another judge block the Trump administration from dismantling the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Do you think that the courts are going to continue to be a problem? Or do we just need to see all of this kind of just, head to the Supreme Court, let's get it over with?
Well, the courts are going to continue to be a problem. I mean, this is a legal strategy Mark Elias, Norm Eisen, and others on the far left crafted really in the wake of the outcome of the election. They put a team together, and that's their strategy. They know they've lost the executive branch. They know they've lost the legislative branch, but they're still digging in everywhere they have hooks in the judiciary branch. And that's why this week we're going to pass the No Rogue Rulings Act, which gets after the ability of one district judge to basically provide a nationwide injunction that shuts down the president's campaign promises, not on merit, but on activism.
Right. Well, President Trump ran on him extending his former tax policy, but he also added on the campaign trail new provisions, no tax on tips. That was very popular, in particular when he made that announcement in Nevada at the time. So what does Congress need to do to realize the provisions? Because when you extend the 2017 tax cuts, that is a hit to revenue. Obviously, that's costly. That's fair enough. But then if you add on no tax on tips, overtime, that's another popular pitch from President Trump. That's going to be up to you and your colleagues in the House to figure out the pay for. How do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, that's what this reconciliation resolution's about. You've heard the president and Speaker Johnson refer to one big, beautiful bill. Speaker Johnson's working with Leader Thune to kind of reconcile the differences between the House passed version. We passed that on February 25th. The Senate's got a version that's a little different. And we do need to move forward. But the reality is, unless Congress takes action, the American people are going to get a tax increase. And there are some people that we're counting on not just status quo taxes, but some additional cuts like no tax on tips. And look, candidly, if it's not somebody that's on my payroll, it's somebody that's a valet or a server at a restaurant, and it's not a service fee. If I give them money, it really is just a gift. There's already a $17,000 gift exemption. So we're working on legislation to treat it that way, and that kind of avoids the whole situation. There
are ways to make sure that the language in the bill actually lends itself to making this a reality, because it was definitely very popular. Before you go, I do want to ask you about this. So President Trump is reportedly aiming to sign 2 stablecoin bills by August. So first off, I want to ask, is that timeline from what you're hearing correct? And the second would be, the stablecoin would be a dollar-backed stablecoin. This is what is being reported is going to be in front of the House. And then the Genius bill, that's basically it's regulatory positives for consumers so that consumers would get priority in bankruptcies with these coins. Can you confirm any of this for us?
Well, the Senate passed a version out of their committee called the Genius Act, which Senator Hagerty led. And then the House is passing a bill called the Stable Act, which you put the two together, it'll be stable genius or something along those lines, and it'll regulate stable coins. And it does deal with dollar-denominated stable coins. Hopefully we'll get commodity-backed stable coins treated that way. So it's backed one for one with gold and be traded different than dollars. And we're fighting to make sure that we also protect self-custody. So there are little differences that do make a world of difference in terms of the kind of product that gets across the finish line. And really, how do we best protect the American people? But the second big bill really is a market structure bill. And that gets after how, Gary Gensler was so unpopular at the SEC, basically treating everyone in the crypto space as if they had a security. And clearly, some of those things aren't securities. And we need to get that market structure bill passed as well.
So, yeah, is it a security or is it a commodity is the question mark. And what I was saying was, is that timeline, realistic? I mean, August, is that realistic for this legislation to get signed? Because you've got two different bills coming from both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, here in April, we'll get, the House passed version. We'll probably go to conference committee between the Senate version. Okay. And I think we can get that done. The market structure bill's got some work to do. And that's why you look at, June, July for market structure. And I think, we got a version passed through the House last Congress. It had 71 Democrats. So there is bipartisan support for some of this legislation.
Bipartisan support, that's something you don't hear very often. All right. Congressman Davidson, it's always great to speak with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Cheryl.
All right, we're going to be watching your work.
President Trump was joined at the White House by Kid Rock when Trump signed an executive order targeting ticket scalpers. And now look who's here on this program now. The man, Kid Rock himself. Sir, we're going to get into ticket prices in a second. But first, I want to hear about your dinner with the president. What did you, Bill Maher, and Dana White and the president talk about?
It went so well. We talked about a lot of things that we had in common, which Bill Maher is a big, supporter of Trump's stance on the border, of ending wokeism. The president even asked him about policy, like what he thought with Iran getting a nuclear weapon and how Israel should react. Bill's a big supporter of Israel. We broke bread and talked about things we had in common, and it could not have been more cordial, more nice. I think everyone was so pleasantly surprised. I mean, it was so nice to have my friend Dana White there, and Dana goes, he told me, he goes, Bob, you did the right thing here. This was a good thing. Because everyone was a little suspect about it. Even the president had called me a few days ago. He goes, what the hell you got me doing here? And I'm like, we're just trying to break bread with some of our biggest critics and say, like, hey, it's okay to talk to one another. We can maybe bring a little bit of civility back to this country for reasonable people.
How do you maintain a friendship with Bill Maher? Because you're very different on politics, I think.
Yeah, we've 30 years ago when he had his show Politically Incorrect, it was the first TV show I'd really ever done early in my career. And it's not like we stayed best friends through that, but, he's had me on his podcast and on his TV show. And I'm like, man, this is good to go. It's easy for me to go on Fox News. Everyone's so friendly and so nice. We kind of align with our thoughts and ideas. But I kind of like going into the lion's den a little bit and talking to people who differ than me and seeing, where we can connect on things and just try to be a little more civil. I've been one of the most polarizing figures out there. I know that. But I'm like, hey, maybe we can just try to be a little nicer to each other. What the hell?
You're from Detroit, I believe, home of the big three automakers. I got that. What do you make of Trump's tariffs on autos and auto parts coming into the country?
I think it's great. I think we should be making more of these cars in Detroit. I know they make the Ford Raptor there and things, but I know there's other cars that are, we design them in Detroit. It's some of the big three, and then the engines, and they're assembled in Canada or Mexico. And I think it's great for our auto workers, for everybody. Why wouldn't we want? And now the president's talking about giving people a tax break if they buy a car that's actually built in America. This is all great news for Detroit, in my opinion.
Did that come up for discussion last night?
No, we talked about that in the Oval Office a little bit, but no, dinner was awesome. It was weirdly so awesome that just to see, the president and Bill could not have been more engaged and just had such a nice conversation. And then one point I will make is Bill, has obviously been a big supporter of so many, of the left, supporting, Clinton and Kamala and Barack and everyone. And he had never been to the White House. And the president took us up to the private residence, and we were showing Bill the Gettysburg Address in the Lincoln bedroom. And I was like, you've never been here? And Bill was like, no. And I was like, can you believe you're here with President Trump showing you around? And he was like, everybody just knew it was a special hopefully it's a special moment. It sets an example. You know, I never anticipated on trying to set a positive example in this country for something like this, but you know, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And Pastor Paul had prayed over me before I went to the Oval Office, and it was just, man, it was one of the neatest days of my life, I will say.
I want to just get to one last one: ticket scalping. Listen to what Mr. Trump had to say about the executive order on it. Roll tape, please.
It bothers a lot of other artists too. You see the artists, and they go out with a $100 ticket and it sells for $2,000 the following night. Ticket sales and scalping and all of the gouging that you have been reading about, that's gotten worse and worse with time. And I didn't know too much about it, but I checked it out, and it is a big problem. And I thought, I think you've been trying to get this done for 20 years or something. He said Trump got it done in 2 weeks. But we came up with a very serious EO.
I just wonder how you fix this when you've got enormous demand for a very limited supply of tickets. How do you decide who gets the tickets?
Well, it should be when you go into the queue to get tickets. Not everybody to a hugely popular show is going to get tickets, but as an artist, you know, we want to get, the majority of us want to get the prices we set into the hands of the fans at those prices. I've been the first one to say, and the president hates it when I say, like, sir, I'm a little overpaid. I would rather be more of a hero to working class people so they can go to more shows. And this is the first step to really, you know, try to get the bots and the bad actors, the scalpers out of the way. Ultimately, and I'm a capitalist and a deregulation guy, but ultimately what I would like to see is get some legislation passed that puts a cap on the resale of concert tickets, like a 10% cap. And that eliminates all the BS and the bad actors right off the bat. So, you know, I can try, because if I sell a ticket for $20, somebody's going to mark that up to $200. I don't see any of the money. The fans don't get anything out of it. It's just, you know, you're just paying people to do nothing. So I just want to make it more affordable. We want to make America fun again, make America affordable again.
Kid Rock, thank you very much for being on the show. Real pleasure. Don't be a stranger.
I love your show, Varney.
Oh, I died and went to heaven. Kid Rock, you're all right. Thank you very much indeed, sir. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you again soon. That's a lot. That's great.
Now, Musk is launching a DOGE-led investigation into the personal fortunes of Democratic members of Congress.
There's a lot of strangely wealthy members of Congress. I just can't, I'm trying to connect the dots of how did they become rich while earning, how'd they get $20 million if they're earning $200,000 a year? It sounds, nobody can explain that.
DOGE is not slowing down, and neither is the rhetoric. For the latest, let's get straight to Fox Business's Grady Trimble. Hey, Grady.
Hey, Jackie, and as we wait for the DOGE team to dig into why so many career politicians have such high net worths, we also know that the team is expanding its reach to more federal agencies this week, now targeting the Securities and Exchange Commission and, as you noted, the CIA. The president's executive order on Inauguration Day instructs agency heads to create DOGE teams made up of at least 4 employees. Here's what the SEC tells us. In compliance with the president's EO establishing DOGE, the SEC is beginning to onboard members of the team. We also know, as you noted, that Musk is meeting with CIA Director John Ratcliffe today. We'll see what comes from that meeting. And even as those protesters in D.C. and across the country criticize Musk, he's doubling down on DOGE and making a new argument. He's making the case that DOGE's work will help grow the overall economy.
By reducing waste and fraud, we'll essentially make the economy more efficient, and we'll shift people resources from the government to the private sector. And that will result in an increase in the output of goods and services. And so the average standard of living will therefore rise.
And the New York Times is reporting DOGE gained access to a payroll system that processes salaries for some 276,000 federal employees across dozens of agencies. No word on what the DOGE folks are going to do with that info, but the Times reports some employees who push back against sharing it are on administrative leave and under investigation. I think the point there, Jackie, is that DOGE is not deterred by anyone trying to stop them.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Grady Trimble, thank you.
We're working on TikTok. We have a lot of potential buyers. There's tremendous interest in TikTok. The decision's going to be my decision, as you know, through Congress. They've given me the power to make the decision. We have a great team of people essentially taking bids. We have a lot of people that want to buy TikTok. We're dealing with China also on it because they may have something to do with it, and we'll see how that goes.
If no deal, will you extend the deadline?
Well, there'll be a deal with TikTok. We would.
President Trump speaking with reporters yesterday on Air Force One about the Saturday deadline for TikTok to divest its U.S. operations or face a ban in the U.S. The president floating the idea to reduce Chinese tariffs to push Beijing toward a deal, signaling a possible extension to that deadline as well. Joining me right now is O'Leary Ventures Chairman Kevin O'Leary. And Kevin, you have offered to buy the app yourself. Thanks so much for being here this morning. Where are you on this bid? Have you heard a response?
Well, the president's right. There's a lot of interest. Frank McCourt and I, who put the syndicate together, Project Liberty, to buy TikTok, are waiting the outcome, like all the others are, from Xi. This is a company that has a golden share in it, where the government of China, notably Xi, decides what he's going to do. Obviously, Trump is trying to coax a decision out of him by offering tariff points. And Trump is right. You know, a single tariff point is probably worth more than TikTok. But we don't have any indication yet, any of the buying groups, that Xi has decided what he wants to do. The anticipation is that we'll get an extension on Saturday because there's no question there are people interested in buying TikTok. I think the difference with McCourt and I is we are preparing for the eventuality, looking at the law and talking. And I'm in Washington right now, Maria. I mean, if you want to find out the status of lawmakers' views on TikTok, you just have to go to Cafe Milano and hang out there for an hour and a half, and you're going to get an earful from everybody of their opinion. And so at the end of which I did last night, there's a lot of lawmakers that want to see this asset completely disentangled from the Chinese code and ByteDance completely. So the interpretation of what the law says is key. Looming over that, as you're well aware, is $5,000 a day per user penalty. There is no company in the S&P 500 that could last more than 11 days without being bankrupt with that penalty. So we're trying to balance all this out. My attitude is, and I can speak for Frank on this one, we're here to help. Look, we'll work a deal any way we can, and if we're told we cannot use the source code or ByteDance can't be an owner or whatever Trump and Xi decide, we're going to work with that.
But how do you ensure that if you don't have the source code, if you don't have a ByteDance, that you are going to have the same product, but you don't have the Chinese surveillance, propaganda, and everything else that comes with TikTok?
Well, you have to write it from scratch, and that's been done before. You got to remember, Microsoft rewrote Skype from scratch. There's AI models now that can assist you to do that. Look at Instagram Reels. It's getting better every week. These models learn. I think you can actually start from scratch if you had to and keep all of the 7 million businesses that are using TikTok afloat, which is really my motivation, Maria. I'm an advocate for small business. We use this product every single day. It's 60% of our digital spend. Nobody wants it turned off. Whatever it takes, we'll figure it out. That's my whole point. We got to work with Oracle. They got the servers right now. There's enough elements in place, enough people interested, a syndicate large enough to work this out. We just have to find out what Xi wants to do. And Trump knows that, and he's doing everything he can to get him to the table right now. Now, the other alternative, which nobody wants, is what happened in India in 2020. Xi just shut it off. That's not a good outcome for anybody. But you got to remember, in the context of ByteDance globally, this asset's only about 9% of the value. So the shareholders there, you know, if that happens to them, okay, it's a loss of $20, $30 billion. I get it, but it's not the end of the free world for them.
President Trump, meanwhile, spoke with the new Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, last week. I want to get your take on this. Kevin, he posted about the meeting. He said it was an extremely productive call. We agree on many things, and we'll be meeting immediately after Canada's upcoming election to work on elements of politics, business, and all other factors that will end up being great for both the United States of America and for Canada. The call, of course, came after Carney bashed Trump and his tariffs earlier in the day. Watch this.
We will fight the U.S. tariffs with retaliatory trade actions of our own that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impacts here in Canada. The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation, is over.
What do you think, Kevin? It certainly feels like Canada and the U.S.'s relationship has changed in a big way. We did a story earlier in the show about how Canadians are selling real estate in Florida right now.
The anti-U.S. rhetoric is being stirred up by Carney because his party
that's right.
devastated the country over the last 10 years. And the only way he can stay in power is to convince people he's the solution against Trump. So the rhetoric has never been hotter. And of course, he's 5 weeks away from an election. So he'll stir the pot any way he can. But let's not forget where Carney came from. He is a global elitist. He's a supporter of carbon taxes. He said he'll remove them from consumers, but he's going to double down on business in Canada. And that decimated. You got to remember, Canada actually only grew under the Liberal Party 1.4% in 10 years. The economy's been wiped out. One of the reasons Canadians can't go to Florida is his party wiped out the value of the dollar, down 41%. Canadians can't afford to go to Disneyland anymore. So Carney's doing it the very best he can to say, look, I will save you against Trump. And he throws the rhetoric out every day against him, a man named Pierre Poilievre, who's also trying to be elected as a conservative. They're both in a crazy rhetoric, an anti-American rhetoric, that will go away the minute this election's over. He will get on a plane, whoever wins, fly to Washington, and start working on what I call NAFTA 3, which is the right thing to do. I might add that Senator Kennedy in Louisiana gave an eloquent presentation about why tariffs between Canada and the United States should be zero. I listened to it. It made a whole lot of sense to me, and I think it'll make a lot of sense to the Canadian people as well as soon as this election is over. Will Carney win? Who knows? But he's backtracked like crazy on all the Liberal parties. Whether people trust him or not will be the determination, because he certainly was he advised Trudeau for the last 5 years. And so the idiot king is gone, but is Carney any better? Nobody knows yet.
Well, let me get your take before we go, Kevin, on these tariffs. The president's reciprocal tariffs will kick in on Wednesday at midnight. What are you expecting? Obviously, markets are, hyper nervous about this, and we're seeing some companies unable to give us a real guidance for the 2025 calendar year because they don't know what it's going to cost them. How do you think this lands?
I take the positive view, Maria. I believe this is the beginning of a negotiation. 17 states in America, their largest trading partner is Canada. 75% of Canadian output is purchased by Americans. It would be stupid for these two countries to go to war together, not when they've been married for over 100 years. This is a tiff. It's a marriage, and they're having a little tiff. That's what I say. So as soon as this election's over, which is unfortunate for the Canadian people right now, the negotiations will begin. We should have no tariffs on the 49th parallel. It should be an open market, and the best companies win. That's combining the two economies to everybody's benefit. That would be a behemoth that China could never catch up with.
All right, we'll be watching. We'll see. You think it's all poker face. It's just poker face.
That's what I think.
Negotiation. All right.
That's what I think.
You could be right. We'll see. Kevin, great to see you, sir. Thank you. Meanwhile, Mississippi taking matters into its own hands to put more money in the pockets of residents. The governor signing an historic bill this week to abolish the state's income tax, becoming the 10th state in the nation to eliminate income tax. Joining me now in a Fox Business exclusive is the governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves. Governor, great to have you this weekend. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Maria. It's great to see you, and it's a great day to be an American, and it's a great day to be a Mississippian.
Well, this bill has been in the works for 15 years. Tell us what it will mean for the Mississippi economy.
Well, this is, Maria, this is our one big, beautiful bill in Mississippi. We've been working to cut taxes and moving towards eliminating the income tax, and I was finally able to sign a bill into law this week that over time gets us to accomplish exactly that goal. In Mississippi, we believe government ought to take less so that our people get to keep more of their money.
And when you look at other states that have no income tax, you've seen a huge surge of individuals moving from high tax states to low tax states or no income tax states. Is that what you're expecting?
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you see not only economic growth in those states with no income tax, you also see population growth in those states. And we think we have a beautiful state in Mississippi. We've got a beautiful coastline on the Gulf of America. And I will just tell you that we have seen significant economic growth over the last 5 years. We've seen over $30 billion in new capital investment flowing to our state. And we think by eliminating our income tax, we're going to see not only more income and capital flow into our state, we think we're going to see more people flow into our state. And so it's an opportunity for us to be more competitive on the national landscape, and we think it's going to work beautifully.
That is just incredible. And I love that you referred to the Gulf of America. I've talked to President Trump about his own tax cut plan. And one question I always ask him is, how are you going to offset? If you're going to cut taxes and eliminate the income tax like you're doing it, where does the revenue come from?
Well, I've talked to the president about his desires to cut taxes as well. And for us in Mississippi, you got to know where we start from. We're going to collect about $7.8 billion in total revenue this year. And our current budget spends just barely over $7 billion. So we have a $750 million annual surplus in the state of Mississippi. And so I believe that if you allow government to keep that $750 million surplus, they will find a way to spend it. But I think it's better for your economy to let individual Mississippians spend more of their money, which will then grow the economy. So the combination of more capital investment in our state, more job creation in our state, more income growth through per capita income growth, which Mississippi is in the third quarter of 2024 was the fourth fastest growing per capita income growth in all of America. We're going to see significant economic output in our state, and that's going to lead to us being able to fund the necessary services in government while also letting our people keep more of their own money.
Well, that is terrific. And like President Trump, it sounds like you're counting on growth. And that growth will create the revenue that I'm referring to. Look, the president is pushing to cut taxes on a national level. By downsizing the IRS, he's creating this external revenue service, replacing income tax on U.S. citizens with tariffs on foreign countries. Just this week, the president announced a new round of levies on foreign-made cars. Watch.
We're going to charge countries for doing business in our country and taking our jobs, taking our wealth, taking a lot of things that they've been taking over the years. What we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States.
Governor, auto manufacturing, one of the top sectors in Mississippi with more than 200 auto manufacturers and over 500,000 vehicles produced in the state every year. How are these tariffs going to affect your state?
Well, Maria, there's no shortage of opinions with respect to President Trump's tariff proposals. But let me tell you what our experience has been in Mississippi over the last couple of months. We've had tremendous success since I've been governor now over 5 years of not only investment from American companies, but also direct foreign investment. What we've seen over the last couple of months is our deal flow and our potential deals in our economic development shop have never been greater. We are seeing potential investments from countries all over the world because they're going to produce more in America. We've seen companies that are headquartered here that maybe are doing manufacturing in other parts of the world that are looking to bring those manufacturing operations back on shore. The fact of the matter is that we have the potential for a manufacturing boom in America, and Mississippi is better positioned than most states because we never gave up on manufacturing. That's what we do in Mississippi. We make stuff, and we make it really, really well. And so these proposed tariffs and what they have meant to our deal flow has been nothing but positive. And I will tell you, I've got a team going overseas literally this weekend. This will be the third trip to a foreign country in the last 3 weeks. There are lots of opportunities out there for governors and for those in states that want to see manufacturing relocate in the United States. And that's been our experience.
Wow, how wonderful that you never gave up the manufacturing part of the economy, because we need those supply chains here in America. President Trump, meanwhile, and Education Secretary Linda McMahon are pushing to improve U.S. education as well by moving the power back to the states. Watch.
If we don't address the issues in education now and start getting our scores up, if we don't educate in the best way we can, we will be lost, and those generations will be lost. And so by having education at the best place where it can be, which is at the states, the local levels, with governors, with best practices and tools, which I hope the Department of Education can help supply for them, we'll do it.
Governor, your state is a prime example of this as well. Your scores are up. Mississippi is now ranked #1 in the nation for gains in 4th grade reading and math. The New York Times even calling it the Mississippi Miracle. Congratulations. How did you do it?
Well, thank you, Maria. We've worked really hard, but we initiated it with conservative reforms passing in our Mississippi legislature in 2012 and 2013. Which have led to something that's going to surprise a lot of your viewers, and that is Mississippi has been #1 in the nation in growth rates in education. Mississippi has been the exception, while many other states, and quite frankly, the United States in general, have seen declines in education performance over the last 10 years. Mississippi has seen significant improvements. In fact, we went from 49th in the nation 10 years ago in 4th grade reading to 9th best in America. We went from 50th best in America in 4th grade math. We're now 16th best in America. And these conservative reforms, and this is really important because the education establishment, the coalition of the status quo will tell you, well, these conservative reforms only work for some students in some districts. Our experience in Mississippi has been exactly the opposite. If you look at African-American students in our state, 10 years ago, when compared to their peers in the other 49 states, our black 4th graders scored 45th best in America. Last year, our black 4th graders, when compared to their peers, scored 3rd best in America. The point, Maria, is conservative reforms work for all kids in all school districts, and that's been our experience, and it's something that is helping lead our economy to growing, because when you have the smartest 4th graders in the entire southeastern United States, which Mississippi does today, then in 10 years, you're going to have the smartest workforce in the southeastern United States. And that's why we've seen a booming economy here in Mississippi.
Wow, that is just incredible. Governor, great job. We so appreciate you talking about it with us this weekend. Congrats.